We'll be getting started right now. I think we'll go ahead and get started with today's webinar. So thank you all for joining us. My name is Sarah Lipsey from Atlas Research, and I will be your MC today for cultural implications of screening for intellectual and developmental disabilities, the second webinar of this year's EMSC Fan Webinar Series. Thank you so much for joining us. I just want to go over a couple of features of the Adobe Connect that we're using. You are in the Adobe Connect. We have an audio line, although you can also use audio over the phone. We have a chat box. It is in the lower right-hand side of your screen. You can feel free to enter comments and questions as we progress through the presentations today in that chat box. And you can also, when we get to questions and answer sessions or places where you're asked to speak, you can also speak over the phone or out loud or through your computer audio. When you're not speaking, please mute your phones and your computer microphones to decrease background noise and feedback. We are recording today so that folks can watch this in the future. Just a quick overview of today's agenda. We're going to go through some introductions. We're going to have a quick update from EIIC on some resources on their website. And then we will move into our main presentation for today, cultural implications of screening for intellectual and developmental disabilities. And at the end, we will have time for Q&A. So just really quickly, here is our fan activities planning team from HRSA, from EIIC, and from Atlas Research. These are the folks that are helping bring the fan activities together. Really great team here. Here is a map of our great fan representatives. If you don't see your name on here, please email Cassidy Penn. We've got her email address on the website, and we will add you and put you on the fan mailing list. We'd like to give a special thanks to our fan steering committee members who help bring these great events and great resources to you. So I am going to turn it over for the next few minutes to Cassidy Penn, who is going to give us some updates on the EIIC website. Cassidy, it's all yours.
All right, thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. As I'm getting the website pulled up, I just wanted to welcome everybody to the webinar. Sarah and everybody from Atlas does an amazing job coordinating everything, and I know we are all very excited to hear Nanfi speak. She's an amazing speaker with great information, so I won't make this any longer than it needs to be so we can turn it over to our star speaker for the day. As Sarah was going through those slides, I did recognize that I probably have not updated that state map with all of the new names that have come up recently with the new fan members. So I do apologize. So like Sarah said, if you didn't notice your name or if a state has the wrong name, definitely shoot me an email and just give me a real quick reminder that I need to do that. I actually kind of forgot that I created that, so it's a good reminder for me as well. So we definitely want to recognize our fan members and who is representing each state. So please shoot me that email, and I'll put that in the chat box once I am finished. Okay, so on your screen now, you should be able to see our main EMSC IIC website. So the Emergency Medical Services for Children Innovation and Improvement Center website. I just wanted to draw your attention to a few resources because I do know that during this time, especially with COVID, our entire way of life has been changed. Everything from our work lives to our personal lives to our family life and everything in between. So taking the time out of your day to call in for this webinar is so very valuable, and we definitely appreciate you giving up this hour. But we want to just reiterate that we are here to help you guys. We want to be able to give you the best information and really have it all in one place, because if you guys are feeling anything like me, I think probably one of the most overwhelming aspects of all this is just how much things are changing so quickly, and then trying to keep up with it and keep all of the information in one space. So with that being said, if you come to our main page, you'll see our scrolling banner. at the top, and you'll see all of our new updates. Everything that's new, everything that we're pushing out, everything that we're constantly updating is right here. So you'll see our seizure podcast, our seizure toolkit. This is something that's developing. You'll see our disaster triage game. Let me see if I can scroll this. Our newly launched NPRP project was postponed, so that's a release there. Our EMSC Pulse that goes out every month, and then our main updates, and then of course our EMS Week, which is this week, so all of our cool videos and resources for EMS Week, and then our Readiness Toolkit that was actually launched yesterday, and then here are our COVID resources, and that's what I wanted to draw your attention to mainly, because we've done, and by we I mean Meredith and Margaret have done an amazing job of updating this site with all of the new information for COVID that has been released from all of our partners, federal, states, and then organize it into a way that can really help you get to what you need quickly. So if you're looking for something for family readiness, there is a section here for you. If you're looking for school and child care provider resources, there is a link here for you as well. And then mental and behavioral health. You'll see that we have a lot of topics here, but I'm just trying to draw your attention to the ones that I think will be most relevant to this group. And then if you click on that section, you'll see a ton of great links. This infographic that we were able to produce with our fan steering committee, so all of the tips and tricks on this infographic was given to us by fan members. What to expect when going to the emergency department, what that will look like for you and your kiddo, so that way you can prepare them beforehand, because that can create a lot of anxiety. And then just different links to different resources here. So again, this is meant to help you and to, kind of keep it all in one area, which is helpful. And just know that we're updating this constantly, and we're getting all of the information from our federal partners, and we're cultivating it and keeping it here. So definitely check this out when you can, and we love your feedback, and feedback is something that you can give us all the way at the very bottom. So helpful, neutral, not helpful, and then that'll take you to a place where you can give comments. So I know that was a lot of information, and I talked really fast, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview, and I will now pass it back to Sarah and Nancy, and we can get on with the star of the show. So thank you all.
Great, thank you so much. I am going to bring our slides back, and I am going to introduce our main speaker today. Nanfi Lubogo, she is the co-executive director for PATH Parent Family Voices of Connecticut, and also serves on various committees, councils, boards, both Connecticut and nationally. We're really excited to have her presentation today, and I'm going to turn it over to her. Nancy, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Cassidy. And everybody, before I begin my presentation, I just wanted to say, at least from my family, to all of you EMS providers, thank you so much for everything that you do. And especially now more than ever, really appreciate the work that you guys are doing and putting yourselves on the line every day for us. So happy EMSC week. Just wanted to make sure I didn't forget that. So today our presentation is going to be about the cultural implications of screening for intellectual and developmental disabilities. And I know that when I do this presentation, I tailor it for the audience that we're going to be speaking. So a little further down the line, you'll hear me talking about healthcare providers. And I realize, obviously, on this call, there's probably going to be a lot of EMS providers. And so I will try to tailor what I'm saying specifically for you guys. So just a quick, I'm going to go over the overview. I have a couple of slides before that just about my organization, and I just want to do a quick training overview. So we're going to talk about the cultural the definition of cultural competence and cultural and linguistic competence. And we're going to talk about considering cultural competence in screening for intellectual and developmental disability, and what the implications of that particularly are for families from diverse backgrounds, and then the barriers faced by families from ethnically and racially diverse backgrounds. We'll talk about the role of the healthcare provider, and we'll do a little bit of cultural self-assessment, talk about an organizational self-assessment, and also talk about stereotyping and reframing and how we can reframe our language. And then the role of healthcare providers and how you all can assist families in breaking down the barriers and supporting them. And we'll do that through a little didactic that I have, and then at the end, we'll wrap it all up and do a couple of reflections. And as Cassidy and Rachel mentioned at the beginning, please feel free to enter your comments in the comments box as I go along, and we'll try to answer the questions after the presentation. So talking about the definition of cultural competence, I know a lot of people, when they hear about this, at this point in the presentation, I'll be asking you all to shout out and talk about what your definition of cultural competence is. And everybody kind of seems to have what their own version is. And so that's kind of like the word soup of all those things and what it falls up. But I like to use the definition as is given by the National Center for Cultural Competency, which talks about cultural competence being a set of congruent behaviors, attitudes, and policies that come together in a system, an agency, or among professionals and enable that system or agency to work efficiently across cultural situations. A lot of times when the word culture is used, it implies the integrated pattern of behavior that includes thoughts and communications, actions, our beliefs, our values, and so on. And competence is used because it implies having the capacity to function effectively. And of course, when we talk about cultural competence, we cannot forget about linguistic competency. So, you know, that is where we make sure that the information that we have and our communication to families is conveyed in a manner that is easily understood by everybody, diverse audiences, but also people who are limited in English proficiency, or those that have low literacy skills, and of course not forgetting the populations that are deaf and hard of hearing. So that requires an organization and provider to respond effectively to the health and mental health literacy of the needs that they're serving. So when we talk about considering cultural competence in screening for IDD, that issue of disability can have so many racial and cultural implications. Screening to identify disabilities, developmental and intellectual delays, and special health care needs can be emotionally charged. So just thinking about now obviously when I talk about screening, I realize that, you know, AMS providers might not be the first line of screening when it comes to intellectual disabilities. So just think about it in the context of, you know, your dealings with, you know, families from racial and cultural diverse backgrounds. But basically, developmental and intellectual delays and that screening can be emotionally charged. So the evidence suggests that children who come from diverse backgrounds, especially children from non-English speaking backgrounds, they're less likely to be screened than children from from white English speaking families. And further, it shows that families from diverse backgrounds often don't take the next step after they feel that the children fail that first screening at the same rate that either white or middle-class families, and that often leads to a greater number of underserved families being diagnosed in the lost to follow-up categories. And so this is a little bit more data. These are a little bit more data points from the Massachusetts Act Early Considering Culture and Autism. And it pretty much talks about everything that I talked about before. Screening can be difficult, being screened early, having follow-up evaluations when they fail a screening, get the early diagnosis and access to early services. So in the median age in the first evaluation for ASD, for instance, In white families, it's 38 months. In African American families, it's found to be 40 plus months, and in Latinos, it's 43 plus months. So the prevalence is that non-white children, non-Hispanic white children are 30% likely to be identified with ASD than non-Hispanic black children, and 50% are more likely to be identified than Hispanic children. And this just talks a little bit more. So why do we have these disparities? Why is it that more immigrant families or families from diverse backgrounds fall into that category? And the issue is that some of them might not have a familiarity with IDD. When I say IDD, I'm talking about intellectual and developmental disabilities that many English families have. A lot of times they may not have known any other children in their native country who has an intellectual or developmental disability. Expectations for language development and other skills of development may differ from culture to culture, and sometimes in some cultures it could be considered normal by a 2-year-old to lack more language and more elaborate play. And then in some cultures, the word evaluation and or research may have negative connotations, and it could be met with mistrust. So going back to the unfamiliarity, I always like to tell a story here that talks about why everybody thinks disability is everywhere, which it is, but in some cultures, disability is taboo, and therefore a lot of children who are quote unquote not born normal get, back in the day here in the United States, they were institutionalized. In some countries, because there might not be any institutions, they're shipped off to live with their grandparents, and in some horrible cases, children who are, those babies might not even live to make, they might not live past a certain age, and a lot of times they're shipped off and basically removed from society and not even talked about because it's considered taboo and a curse to have a baby who is not quote-unquote normal. And then when we talk about evaluation and research, the other thing that I like to highlight here is you might think, when we think about it clinically and the evaluation and the research, in a clinical way, these are all necessary things for screening. But in some cultures, that could be received with a lot of fear and met with mistrust. For instance, we have families, in the Navajo Nation who are living today who remember times when they were removed from their families and shipped away by the government because they were going to be researched on. So, people even who are in today's society remember that. And so when you talk about that, it could have that negative connotation for them, and they might you might be met with mistrust. So those are things just to consider what the issues are. So barriers, the other things, obviously, are barriers faced by families from diverse backgrounds. Like I talked about, screening can be culturally sensitive, and that could make the parent perspective on screening, it could impact their screening. So, somebody, let's say, presents with a child and they get a screening and they fail that screening and they're told to go follow up because they don't understand what that follow-up means. And they don't understand why their baby has to be poked and tested. They might not come back for follow-up, for further follow-up. And that could, like I said before, it could be about their cultural beliefs. It could be about the stigma that they might face if they get that diagnosis. And like I talked about, it could be a taboo and a curse in a lot of families. Disability is really shunned upon. And later on in the presentation, I will present you guys with a story. It's actually a true story, and we'll talk about how the issues of stigma and taboo really caused an issue for a young mother. Some of the other barriers, as we talked about, are limits on language access, limits on immigrant eligibility, so they don't follow up because they maybe don't have health insurance. and they've been sent to a specialist, and they cannot afford to that specialist. They cannot afford going to that specialist because they don't have the papers that would get them the insurance. There's a lack of cultural diversity among providers, and again, it goes back to that issue of trust, and them just not being able to trust somebody who does not look like them. And then a lot of times there's a lack of awareness of what the resources out there. And now more than ever, a lot of families are intimidated by anti-immigrant rhetoric and afraid to even come to, to doctor's appointments or present themselves to the, anywhere that they feel somebody in authority might be that might end up getting them, kicked out of the country or a referral that goes to DCF. And then a lot of times there's also parents who are just scared and hesitant to talk to their child's provider. So when you encounter any of these things, it's really trying to, think outside the box, try to develop a relationship of trust for the family, trying to ensure that they feel comfortable when they come, to seek help, trying to find somebody who maybe speaks their language, or at least get them access to translation services where they can understand and take in the information in their language, and then really trying to develop a relationship with them so that they're not hesitant to continue seeking help. So what is the role of healthcare providers, and how can we encourage immigrant and underserved families to get their children screened? And if screening reveals a need for follow-up, how do we ensure that they can then follow up? It's just about keeping calm and really asking questions, like I spoke about, developing a relationship with them. And now, for instance, we're talking about this, if you think about this as an EMS provider, if you're responding to a family, let's say in a home, or if a family presents at the ED, and they're a diverse family and they're seeking, whatever help that they need, but it looks like, you're hitting a barrier, getting what you're asking them to follow through on. It's really stopping and asking questions and trying to figure out how you can help this family and make them comfortable so that they can follow up whatever protocols you're asking. So this is a story of, this is a didactic that I was talking about. I want you to meet Helen. This is a true story. And I'm just calling her Helen, not using her real name, and I'm not going to use the facility that she was, that she presented at, the ED that she presented at. So it's a story of a young female, approximately 30 weeks, that comes to the ED for unidentified illness, and she has a really high fever. Upon examination, it's discovered that she's pregnant, approximately 30 weeks. Subsequently, she's admitted to the hospital to check on the baby. Further interviews reveal that mom was a visitor to the United States on a visitor's visa, attending a conference with a group of about 30 other foreign nationals, and she became ill and was told to go to the nearest ED. When they did the ultrasound and other testing ordered, it was revealed that the baby had a diagnosis of spina bifida. The mom was informed, and further interview reveals that she did not seek regular prenatal visits in her home country and was unaware of the baby's diagnosis. She doesn't understand what spina bifida is, and when she's advised that the best thing for the baby is immediate surgery, she screams inconsolably and utters out, oh my God, I'm cursed, they're going to kill my baby. And she's completely inconsolable, utters the same word and curse and kill all in the same sentence. And all the way through admission and surgery, causing her to be placed on a safety watch. At some point during admission and the surgery, a referral was made to DCF because they were afraid that she was a danger to herself. She might be a danger to herself and the baby. So a referral was made to DCF, and mom was informed that she could not have access to the baby without DCF involvement. At some point during that time, we got the referral to help this mom understand what this DCF involvement would look like. And it basically took a lot of years and a lot of back and forth and communication and education between PATH and the young lady and the hospital ED that she presented at to provide education on how to. So basically, we had to talk. We spent a lot of time educating the mom how the process happened and why it happened, and then we also had to do some education at that ED and within the hospital system about the cultural implications of what happened and why she didn't understand what she did led to her losing her baby. So at this point, if we can, in the chat box, if we can discuss, or if you're on your phone, I guess they can maybe raise their hands if they want to chat to talk about how or what could have been done for this family instead of her being her baby immediately being removed from her and DCF getting involved. So this is just a case about how cultural barriers and cultural implications happens when, and it's both on the family side, not understanding, but it's also on the hospital side, not understanding what things like, disability and taboo and sick baby mean in certain cultures. And if the hospital had maybe taken the time to talk and understand why this mom was saying what she was saying and the really strong feelings that she had around this and why she probably didn't mean that, her baby was going to die. These were just big issues in her culture, and she felt she had to say. So I just wanted to throw that out there and ask you guys if you wanted to throw into the chat box anything that you think how this case could have been handled a little bit different. And we're just going to take just about, just a couple of minutes. I don't want to hold up the whole entire presentation discussing this, but if anybody's brave enough to raise their hand or unmute their mic and talk to me a little bit about this, I would appreciate it.
Just a note for folks who are using your computer mics, you may have to turn them on. There should be a microphone symbol at the top of your screen. You can turn on your computer mic. I do see some folks are typing into the chat as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. I see Candace. Okay, so I see Candace said it would have been helpful to bring in somebody from her culture to speak to her. Absolutely. Prior to everything happening. They brought us in after the fact. It would have been great to bring somebody or a family organization in prior to all this happening to understand why. Yes, thank you, Candace. I think I heard somebody chime in before I spoke. Was somebody trying to say something over the phone? Okay, so Candace is also asking, what about social supports? Did she have a friend that attended the event with her? Yes, she did. She came with a group of people, but no effort was made to reach out to anybody in her circle to find out, or at least to figure out what she meant by all of that. So unfortunately, nobody did. But yes, it would have been great to reach out to her immediate circle. She didn't have family here, obviously, but she did have a group that she was traveling with, and probably the host of the conference that she came to attend might have been great to maybe reach out to somebody there too. So Amanda says, why was DCF involved? So DCF got involved because during her whole stay, she was very inconsolable, and she kept on saying that she was cursed and they were going to kill her baby, and that she didn't want to go back home, and if she went home and she took her baby home, her baby would be killed. And the reason why is that this young lady came from a tribe that really looked down upon and shunned, anybody, any person that was quote unquote normal. So disability is really looked down upon, and she felt like if she did not have the perfect baby, her husband either would take the baby and kill it or kill her, or so that's the reason why. And I understand that, that can be scary when you're listening to that. But I think that a lot of time could have been spent in really, truly understanding what the situation was. Yeah. Candace says mental health support, crisis intervention, somebody to advocate for her. Again, all agreed. I'm just going to give Amanda 1 second, and then we can move on. So, yeah, it was just extremely unfortunate, and it took years to get the baby back. Once DCF gets involved, at least in our state, once DCF gets involved, it, the system kind of takes over and it just runs. And, by the time she got her baby back, it was 2 years. She had to get all kinds of, and she ended up having to live here longer than she had to renew her visa, because they wouldn't, she couldn't leave the country because, again, DCF needed her to be involved, and otherwise she was going to be deemed unfit, as an unfit parent. If she left the country, they would think that she was abandoning. So, okay, so Amanda says, thanks for clarifying. I thought she was worried that the doctors were going to kill her baby. No, it was not that she thought the doctors were going to kill her baby. She thought that if she, took her now sick baby back to her home country. Remember, she was here temporarily, just for a conference. And she was afraid that if she took her baby back, her husband might not want the baby, and she said would kill the baby. So, I do understand that, the parent, that the hospital providers were looking out for the best interest of the child, but I feel like a lot more time, mental health supports, intervention, advocacy could have been done prior to DCF removing the child. So these are just some of the cases that, that we deal with when, cultural barriers, cultural implications, beliefs, taboos, all those things are not considered. So in your thinking about cultural competency, don't just think, a lot of people just think it's, oh yeah, we're culturally competent if we provide materials in Spanish, if we provide a translation service. We're culturally competent if we, all those things. There's a lot more that you have to scratch the surface. You have to understand taboos, you have to understand stigmas, you have to understand, all those things. And I'm not saying that everybody has to become an expert, but it's really just, talking to the family and learning. If they talk about taboos or curses or issues, ask them why and try to educate that way. And if you don't know, find somebody who does. A lot of times in your states, you'll find their organizations, you can find your cultural broker that can help you to understand these things. You can connect to a family organization that can help you to gain a better understanding of this. So thank you for that. I'm going to move on, continuing talking about the role of healthcare providers. So families always have the greatest interest of ensuring that the children and family services meet their needs, and the most important, and the most to gain in improving services and outcome. Patients can be really powerful partners in their children's care. So again, for EMS folks, let's say you're responding to a family within a home. You want to make sure that you're working with the family to ensure that the child's best care. Again, if they present in the ED, it's involving the family in their child's care, and really looking at them as partners, asking questions, really listening, listening to what they are, So providing health messages to diverse families in ways that they can understand and in manners that consider culture. And again, like I said, not asking you to be an expert, it's just considering these things and talking to the family so that you can get a better understanding. So how do we do all of that, and what do we do? So before we proceed, I think we have to consider what stereotypes are and how we can reframe our language. And so we're going to do some quick exercises. Again, when I ask the questions, please feel free to throw your answers in the chat boxes. So the first thing you would do is a cultural self-assessment. I believe everybody who signed up for the presentation received a cultural self-assessment. If they didn't, I can make these available. It's just a quick one-page sheet that you can look at that can help you. It has some key questions that you can answer about yourself. You want to answer those questions as honestly as you can and kind of rate yourself. And then if you find that you rate yourself low, you want to start trying to address why those things are and trying to look for either training or talking to other colleagues or seeking out, people who, teach culture and understand about culture. So obviously it starts with you. You have to look at you and look at yourself in the mirror and understand who you are. When it comes to culture and supporting families, what makes you uncomfortable? If there are things that you find that make you uncomfortable, how can you overcome those obstacles? So like I said, one of the first things that you can do, just by yourself is taking that cultural self-assessment and going over it and scoring yourself. And then the next thing you want to do is addressing stereotypes and trying to reframe your language. So the thing about stereotypes is everybody has them. It doesn't matter, who you are. It doesn't matter what culture you have, what culture you belong to. And, when I can even talk about it in the broader context of culture, are you a woman? There's stereotypes about women. Are you a man? There's stereotypes about men. There's stereotypes about people who are blonde. There's stereotypes about, people who come from this group or that group. So, you want to talk about, so if everybody wants to, I just can quickly throw in there, if anybody wants to share what some of the stereotypes people have about what your group is. And as I said, you can look at the group in terms of, yourself as a woman, yourself as a man, either you're black or you're white, or whatever you think your quote-unquote group is. And what stereotypes people have about your group, and then talk about how that makes you feel, and does it affect the way that you react to others. And a lot of times, we know that stereotypes can be extremely painful and extremely hurtful, because if people think about people a certain way, and it might make them react to them a certain way. So in this little bubble with Keenan, I just put a little, there was an illustration about, it's talking about what food. So before I talk about that, let me just say, one of the things that that you can do when people put those negative connotations is to turn it around and, make light of the situation, not so that it does not affect you. And so, okay, so I see people have chimed in here. Also, Julie says people who use wheelchairs cannot hear or speak for themselves. And that is a really huge one. All you have to do is talk to any youth who uses a wheelchair, for instance, not just youth, but even older adults who use wheelchairs. There's a connotation that they cannot speak for themselves and they cannot hear. And so what happens is that people turn to the person that's next to them and assume just because they're in a wheelchair, they cannot communicate for themselves. Or, for instance, if they use a communication device, people might think that they cannot speak. And so they turn to the person next to them and they speak about them while they're standing right there. So that's a really great stereotype that I thank you, Julie, for sharing that. Any other stereotypes anybody wants to use. So in this stereotype with Keenan, it's the stereotype that, oh yes, all black people love fried chicken, they love their watermelon, their cornbread, and the Kool-Aid. And this was I clipped this from a video, and Keenan had a really hard time answering the question, and he was like, well, why wouldn't I like any of those foods? They're really delicious. But so he took that stereotype and he turned it around and made it like a joke. But it was about his own culture. You obviously don't want to make jokes about other people's cultures. So Julie says, parents as advocates cannot think globally about all disability populations. And that's very true. Yeah, when you're talking to a parent, you know, you're talking about, there's no one size fits all. And all disability, you know, is not all disabilities. One disability does not make all disabilities. Every individual is really unique. Okay. Aha. And another one, Julie said, EMTs, oh, this is a great one. EMTs are just ambulance drivers. And every EMT knows that that is absolutely not true. And so, yeah, you know, sometimes when people throw those at you, I mean, if somebody says, well, I don't want you responding to me. You're just an EMT. You're just, as an EMT, you're just an ambulance driver. You know, that can be really, really hurtful. So really trying to look at what those stereotypes are. And, you know, knowing that you might be a person who falls into that category as an ambulance driver. Thank you, Julie. She says she's got 1 million of them. Yeah. Thank you, Julie. It's really thinking about when a stereotype is thrown at you. You know, how does that make you feel? A lot of times, if somebody throws something at you, it does make you feel a certain way. So just putting yourself, you know, turning around and putting yourself in those, quote unquote, those people's shoes and feeling how you would feel if the tables were turned. So thank you for that. So the other exercise is about reframing. If we learn how to reframe our language about the way we feel about either stereotypes or about a situation, that can go a long way into breaking down barriers. So reframing is basically restating a negative word and making it more positive. And so on the right-hand side, I have a few sentences. And again, please chime in the chat box or unmute yourself so that you can participate. And I'm going to pick on one of them, for instance, and say, those people, oh my gosh, those people, they're so lazy. You know, I just had it with those people. They're extremely lazy. How would you turn that around and make it, and how would you reframe that statement and make it a more positive statement? Reframing our language is not as easy as we think. It's a lot of times we say certain things the way we say them because we're used to them and we get stuck saying them a certain way. So if anybody wants to chime in and see how they can reframe the statement, they are lazy. And I can give you, if it helps, I'll give you the answer to this one, and then we can look at another one. So instead of, oh, there we go. So Amanda says, thank you, Amanda. Amanda says, instead of saying they are lazy, she would say they have so many opportunities to shine. That's right. Or for instance, you could say life is more than work. I mean, in some cultures, truly, that's the approach that people have, you know, and we might look at that and look down upon that, but truly that is one. Okay, so I will move on. So how about they look down on women? And this one is one that probably a lot of you will encounter when you're dealing with families who are from different religious groups, for instance, different cultures, where, you know, for instance, a family presents and it's a woman, the husband and the wife, and the husband addresses everything, and the woman is not allowed to speak in the presence of the husband. And so your first instinct might be, oh my gosh, you know, those people, quote unquote, those people, they look down upon women. How would you reframe that? And I understand that this one can be another difficult one, especially here in this culture in the United States, as you know, most of us you know, are all about female empowerment and women speaking up and speaking their minds and having opinions and all of that. In some cultures, as we know, that's just not the way things happen. And so instinctively, you know, because we have those beliefs and we live a certain way, we would always say it negatively and say, oh, that culture, that particular religious group, boy, do they look down upon women. So Candace says they think so well on their feet. I like that one. But I do want you to think about it in the context of a woman not being able to speak at all or have any say in their child's care. And think about it in the context of, you know, you have a family, you're dealing with a family, they responded to you in the ED or you responded to them, and mom is not allowed to say anything. Dad is speaking and is taking charge. Mom's not allowed to say anything. So I'm going to give Amanda and Lori. I think Lori is also chiming in. I'll just give them a minute to type their questions. Yeah, Lori says they treasure their children. So Lori, are you talking about the men treasuring their children, or are you talking about the wives treasuring their children? I'll give you a minute to answer that if you can. How about thinking about it as cultural positions are followed with respect to women? Amanda's also typing. And like I said, you know, this can be a very difficult situation. And okay, so I'm going to give Amanda here. In EMS setting, we reassure the family, the husband, that they can better treat the patient if we can hear from her directly and get her to describe her ailments. This usually gives the husband both respect and peace of mind. So that's a really good way of looking at it. Yeah, so making him feel comfortable, so that you can help her to. So it's putting him in the position where he'll feel comfortable. Okay, so Lori says, I'm not sure they understand the magnitude of the problem or the solutions that we're suggesting. Right. Okay, so I'm sorry, this is a little bit wonky for us to do while you guys are answering the chat box. So I apologize. I was just trying to read some of the comments that were coming in. But anyway, let's move on. I'll do just one more, and then we can move on. How about they are in denial about their problem? So no matter how many times you try to help this family, again, you know, you've maybe tried to get them the screening, you've maybe tried to get them the assistance that they need. How would you turn that around? And I understand we have just about 10 minutes. I don't want to talk about this too much longer. Okay, so yeah. All right, so I'll go on. So just quickly reframing that statement, they're in denial about their problem. They have a different outlook on life. So it's just really trying to take the statement and turn it around to make it positive. And, you know, I think that whole reframing will help you to also reframe the way you think overall. So I apologize. That was a little bit, you know, wonky just doing this virtually like this. So thank you for your patience. Okay, so really quickly, because I only have a few minutes left, I wanted to continue. So help diverse families, we're talking about what our role as healthcare providers can be. Help diverse families to understand the importance of screening and follow through, either through diagnosis or treatment, and provide direct outreach and assistance to diverse families from families with similar backgrounds. Again, that's, you know, connecting to organizations like Family Voices, Parent to Parent, the PTIs, the Parent Training Institutes in your states, or any other community-based organization and cultural brokers. And then seek, you know, professional development opportunities like I talked about, you know, finding ways that you can go over self-assessment, or as a larger organization, going through that as an organization. And then connecting families to cultural and linguistically appropriate services, including medical homes if you have those in your state. And then building the capacity of families to advocate at the individual program and system level. So it's just really trying to advocate for them and building their leadership skills up. Like I talked about, I think Julie had mentioned this, one size does not fit all. Parents don't know about all disabilities when they're talking about disability. So it's just recognizing there's that diversity among cultures. So not everybody from Africa follows the same cultures. Not everybody from any Asian families. There are so many different variations and cultures, and in those cultures even vary. So it's just really recognizing that diversity, and things like the importance of an elderly family member who's making decisions pertaining to the care of the child, regardless of the age of client, and then being aware of nonverbal communications for signs of difficulty. So if you have families that come in and they present and they're looking down and not looking at you, or they keep nodding and not saying anything, those could be cues that either they're not understanding, or that either they're not understanding what you're telling them, or they're afraid to speak up. So it's just trying to look at those things and maybe reframing your language, and maybe seeking other assistance so that you can figure out what the difficulty if they're not following any protocols. Trying to match gender to the same country to family whenever possible to ensure the best understanding of cultural norms and taboos. And again, this is not something that is easy. And again, it's trying to coordinate or collaborate or partner with any of the parent organizations in your states. So what if we learned that families are most motivated and will be great partners when they're supported, when they're listened to, when their culture and language is considered and respected, and when they're connected to other parents who have experienced their challenges. And healthcare providers will have success when they consider parents as equal partners in their care. So it's all about, trying to be that bridge for the family. And that concludes my presentation, and I guess we have a couple of minutes for any other questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Nancy. That was really great. There's a lot of great information. And we do have about 5 minutes where we could have some questions. You could ask out loud over the phone if you wish, or using your computer audio if you enable your microphone. You can also type your questions into the chat box, and I can read them out. It looks like we have some thank yous for you in the comment box.
Thank
If
you.
folks were interested in learning more, like they wanted to kind of take some of the first steps towards learning more about cultural competency and what they're, what are some good resources for them, where would you recommend that they look?
The National Center for Cultural Competency has a lot of great information. You can just type that in your browser and it will come up. It's NCC, I think nccc.org. They have a lot of they have the cultural self-assessments and organizational self-assessments that are available. That's one of my favorite, because the folks there have done extensive work on cultural and linguistic competency, and so I think that would be a great step. But I think that if, because everybody's from different states, I really highly suggest connecting to any of the FAMs in your state, or any other family organization that can really serve as your cultural brokers to help you to assist families.
Great. What kind of role can family advisory members and family advisory groups play in supporting cultural competency in their EMS systems?
Again, I think it's their role on their role, almost as a cultural broker themselves, because a lot of the fans who I know quite a few of the fans all across the state, all across the country. A lot of them either work with or are part of family organizations and that have the resources so they can actually be the bridge for you guys. If you're dealing with, you have a difficult case that you're dealing with, the first step I would suggest is to reach out to your fan, because they're connected to an organization that might have some cultural brokers from within that could help to bridge you to whatever assistance that you need. So that's a great first step. And fans can, in terms of fans who serve, for instance, on the EMS state partnerships, I think assuring that any of the services that are being presented to families take cultural competence into consideration. And it's for the state partners, for the state managers, to make sure that they are considering those things and working with the fans if they have any gaps in those services, working with the fans to ensure that cultural competency is being addressed everywhere. Because we see a lot of issues when families presented the ED. There have been a lot of cultural issues, as you saw with my story. She started at the ED. And she continued into the hospital system, but she did have the first encounter that she had was in the ED, and so yeah.
Great. That's all really helpful, really great information. Thank you so much for presenting today. I want to let folks on the phone know that I put the self-assessment tool and the cultural reframing exercise documents in a download pod on the upper right-hand corner of the screen if they want to download those resources.
Thanks for that.
Just a few notes. Yeah. We've got another fan webinar topic to be determined, but coming up in August, I've got a great picture here of our fan reps from a couple of conferences ago, I believe, back when we had conferences. Any parting thoughts from you, Nanfi, or from Cassidy?
No, thank you. I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to present, and I know I spoke a lot. I was talking really fast because I was trying to keep track of the time. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to email me anytime, and I'd be happy to do a deeper dive for anybody who wants to.
Great. I brought your email address back up on the screen. Okay. Well, again, thank you to our speakers. Thank you to all of our participants. This concludes the fan webinar, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.